Hey, what's up? Welcome back to Project Freelance. My name is Kay Anagonio, and I am your host here on this podcast all about freelancing. So we are into season 7 now. Season 7 of Project Freelance. I didn't think this show would get past episode 7, but we're in season 7 now, and we're almost at like 200 episodes of this show. If you guys are new to the show, please go back and listen to some other episodes, see who else I've interviewed. I interview a different guest every single week about how they built their freelancing career. And this season on the podcast, I'm trying to talk to more music producers because I do music myself. And so I kind of want to learn more about the process of producing music and audio engineering and things like that, just so that I can get better with my own music and so that I can communicate better to producers that I work with. So before we get into this episode with Jeremy Davis, who is a music producer and audio engineer, I need to let you guys know a couple things. First of all, I have a book out called No Tracers, an Urban Explorer's Diary. You see, when I'm not freelancing, I actually explore abandoned places, and it is my favorite thing to do. I absolutely love it. So I put a bunch of photos and stories together in a book, and I want you to get a copy of it. And if you do get a copy of it, I will sign it for you and include 2 signed photo prints. All you have to do is go to notracers.com/shop and you can pick up a copy of that book. The second thing I need to say is thank you for listening to Project Freelance. If you guys like this episode at any point in time, please do me a favor and leave a rating and some feedback. And if you do that, take a screenshot, send it to me at Project Freelance on Instagram or Twitter, and I will send you a signed photo print to say thank you for that. And lastly, I need to thank our partner, Liquid Death Water. If you've never heard of Liquid Death Water, don't worry. I've got an ad coming for you in 3, 2, 1. From the streams of the Austrian Alps comes a new kind of water. A water that is sure to raise you from your grave. If you're tired of buying cases of plastic water bottles that contain carcinogens and God knows what else, or if you're trying to lower your waste footprint, Liquid Death comes in beautifully rugged aluminum cans. Murder your thirst with a can of Liquid Death. Check the link in the description and use code JustTheLetterK at checkout for 10% off your order. Liquid Death. Murder your thirst. So yeah, if you guys want a discount on Liquid Death Water, go ahead and use the code JustTheLetterK at checkout or click the link in the show notes and it will take you directly to that affiliate site. Thank you guys for listening. All right, Jeremy, please introduce yourself and what it is you do to the Project Freelance audience.
So my name is Jeremy Davis and I am an audio engineer / music producer. I sort of wear several hats in the studio. So I guess it just depends on the day and the project on what I'm doing. I might actually be playing some instruments here and there, so it kind of depends. But yeah, that's the gist.
Kind of a jack of all trades. I like that. You know, I think it's it adds a lot to your production work if you can also play the instruments. You know, so it's super super cool that you do that. How did you get into music? What gave you the bug?
Growing up, I was always into music. I'd say that's probably my first true love because it wasn't anything that was like really imposed on me. I just growing up, you know, me and my younger brother, we were always like dancing to music. I was born on the East Coast, New Jersey. We grew up heavily like on hip hop. I remember listening to like, you know, Tupac, Biggie, that sort of thing. I used to dance around to like MC Hammer and stuff like that. So music for me was always this positive, fun thing. I would recite lyrics to songs in the back. My mom used to give me a hard time because she'd be like, you can't remember what I just told you or like these directions, but you can recite literally like this whole Warren G song from start to end. So yeah, I don't know what it was. I just started as a fan of music basically.
So like you, I also grew up, you know, with hip hop. Like I tell people Eminem raised me more than my parents did, you know?
Yeah.
and hip hop influences my music greatly. Like I'm in a couple, like a metalcore band or a post-hardcore band and a hardcore band, but I still want to implement elements of hip hop into my music. Like I have rap features on my songs, because that's how much rap influences what I do. And I listen to rap music every day, hip hop music every day. Does hip hop influence the music you're working on now in any way?
Yeah, I'd say it still does. Although it's kind of, it's different. Most of the music I do in the studio is either like hard rock, metal sort of vibe. So it is quite a bit different. But there's certain things about how just approaches. I guess I'm a big fan of, I don't know if if you know who Tech Nine is, but I'm a huge fan of Tech Nine. And just how he goes about laying down his lyrics and how he goes about writing his music is an approach that I'll use sometimes in the studio. It might not even just be vocals. It might be, I don't know, harmonies or different things inside the songs, but just like his perspective. So I guess maybe not the music in and of itself, because like I said, most of it is like hard rock, and if I'm being honest, like 90% of it is like death metal. It's all faster stuff. But sure. I guess just sort of the approach to the music and just, I don't know, just I would say like different perspectives on writing different things. I still keep those things and utilize those things, especially.
Yeah, I like that, you take the elements of what like artists like Tech Nine do and kind of bring that into your world, especially, like you said, you're doing a totally different genre. Death metal is very different than hip hop, but I think that you can still incorporate your influences into it. So that's super cool that you do that. How did you learn how to, create music? How did you learn how to do audio engineering and music production? Do you have any like formal training? Did you go to school for it, or are you completely self-taught?
I am completely self-taught. But the beauty of the age we live in now, I feel like, especially for this type of job, I'm not trying to be a doctor, so I don't feel like I need schooling for it. There's so much that you can learn, and there's so much education just online that people offer up for free. That I never really thought like, hey, I need to go to a school for this. But basically how it started was sort of out of necessity. Being a guitar player, I would record myself, but I started out with like a tape cassette. That's basically all I had. Wow. I'd sit in my room with like a tape cassette, record myself, practicing or writing a riff or whatever it was. And then I was like, man, I need to figure out like how to record. Being younger, I didn't really have money to put into like recording gear, and especially at that time there wasn't a whole lot in the way of like digital gear that was very accessible to somebody my age. So basically what I did is, and I can remember this very clear to this day, I went to Best Buy and got like one of those old school computer mics. So like the ones that have like a base and it looks like a wand that's coming out of it. And I literally just USB plugged that into my computer. I found this DAW online called Audacity. They still have it around nowadays. Yeah. And I used that and I just put it in front of my Line 6 combo amp and I would play. And looking back, like, especially to where I'm at now, like the gear, the knowledge, the room, all the different things I have, it seems rinky dink and it's funny and it's, laughable at best. But in that moment, it was just like this eureka, like, oh my God, I can write a riff or I can write some chords out or whatever it was. And I could already do that. But the thing is now I can create another track. I can write on top of that. I'm not burning through tape cassettes. Like my computer can store a lot more than a tape cassette can. So that's kind of like the birth of it. And it kind of just progressed from there. I'd say it wasn't my main focus, writing the music, being in bands and that sort of thing was my main focus, but especially like sharing ideas and stuff like that. And another thing, like getting better as a musician, it was huge. It was a huge catalyst for me as a musician and obviously as a producer, because now I can listen back to what I had made. And it's like you can play and you can hear yourself playing and you think you're doing awesome, but it's totally different when you record it and now you can go over it with a fine-tooth comb and you realize, well, man, maybe that wasn't as awesome as I thought it was. So it was a pretty big thing for me, but that's basically how I had gotten started with it.
Do you think starting on analog, like on cassette, do you think that helped you progress? Do you think it helped you appreciate music production more?
As far as being able to go from analog to like an easier thing, or...
Right.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, it's so clunky to be sitting there in like my bedroom with a tape cassette versus like having a computer and the ability to, like I said, make more tracks, and like it being a little bit more, I don't know, Stone Age at the time, especially now. It still was something where it became such a big tool for me, because now I can actually write a song. You can't really write a song on a cassette. You can write part of the song, but it's so hard to layer, put another layer on it. There's, obviously if it's just me in my room, there's no drums, there's no like rhythmic part of the music that I can use like for writing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And then can you tell me about the first project that you produced that wasn't your own?
Actually, I'm trying to think. It was something I did for free. I think if we're talking like very first thing I did, what I would do like back in the day, because I didn't have access to drums or all the mics, the inputs and all that stuff, because especially with my genre of music, drum production is huge. So I didn't have access to all the mics, drums, that sort of thing, the room to do it. So I would go online to different forums, and these other guys who had studios, they would put up their tracks, their raw tracks. So I would take those, learn how to edit them, learn how to work with real drums. And I'd say those were some of the first projects that I did. Some of those guys had put up like whole songs, just things they recorded. And to me, it didn't matter like how good it sounded. To me, it was more about like learning the basics and getting the fundamentals of recording and editing and all that stuff together. So those were some of the first, I would say, sort of projects I did. And then after that, I think, I want to say our drummer, most drummers are, in a couple bands. And one of his bands that he was in, I did a couple songs for them, just like super cheap. And it was at the time it was done with like programmed drums and stuff. But yeah, it's still on my computer to this day, and it's very hard to listen to. I go back and listen to it, and I just cringe. It's so embarrassing, but at the same time, it's kind of cool because it's like, man, I've come like light years away from that. I had almost no idea what I was doing, like overusing compression, doing all these things like totally wrong. And again, it hurts to listen to, but it's like, on those days where I'm like really in the thick of it, like minor details on a project I'm working on or something, it's like sometimes that'll hit the back of my head like, hey, you have come a long way. Things are different now. So it's this thing I keep around. It's like it's the ugly memory you keep in the closet, but you don't get rid of, because it keeps like this perspective for you that helps you, especially engaging like, how far you've come, and to gauge, I guess to add to that, just growth in general.
Yeah, and I can totally relate to that. I've been doing, vocal covers on YouTube for the past decade, since I was a kid, like since I was a teenager, so it's it's very cringy to go back and watch those videos, and like I'll still get comments on them to this day that say like, oh, this is so sick that you covered this song, and I'm like, wow, this video is literally 8 years old. I can't believe you're watching this.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does show your progression over the years, and it shows you where you've come from. And so I think it's cool to hold on to those memories and keep those things alive, just as a reminder to you, like you said, when you're having like a harder time or you're going through it, it's nice to be able to look back and kind of see like where you've come from and where you've gone. So have you had any like internships, or have you ever interned anywhere while you were studying and learning how to produce music?
No, I learned, I guess by YouTube University and just trial by fire. There's not really much besides like online education that I've done. And even like nowadays they have like, URM and Creative Live where you can go on and people literally like take you from on it, just about anything. Like it could be cooking, painting, audio, whatever it is, they'll take you from start to finish. It's like a lot of those things really didn't exist. So it would be like searching out a specific thing or finding a certain thing and then just trying to utilize that in my own recordings or my own productions and just, rinse, repeat over and over and over again and just doing it in my spare time, I guess, and that was probably one of the hardest things is like already being in a band focuses like writing the music. Plus I'm married with 2 children and I'm really busy. So before I was doing this full time, it's like I would go to work. Sometimes there were certain times in my life where I had, 2 jobs. So I'd work, get home, be totally dead, help out at the time with our daughter who was just born. Everybody goes to sleep, the whole house is dead, and I would just go into my, quote unquote studio, just my bedroom at the time. And I would just look up things, learn things, just put my headphones on and just work on stuff until I was just absolutely exhausted. And then just doing that a lot, it was trying to just cut out time to learn and get better when you have so much on your plate already was a little bit hard, but at the same time, like, I don't regret any of it. It was a good learning experience, and I think that, you kind of have to put in the hours if you're going to, get better at it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of, anybody that's trying to learn a trade should exhaust themselves, especially when they're young and they are able to do that. I think that it's important to work overtime on your craft, especially, you go to work, you make your money, and then go and forge your path and what you want to do. I think that that's so important. And I mean, I did the same thing. I had a job, and then I would go home and I would study film, like video editing or videography, or I would make a song or do something else, until I was completely exhausted. And then you just wake up and do it all again until you get to where you want to be. And so, yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think that that's super valuable and super important. And then I wanted to know how long did it take you to find your value and your worth? Like, how long did it take you for you to like set your rate? And I'm sure your rate changes depending on like the project, but from working for free to now, like, how did you find where your rate lies?
It's pretty difficult to do that, especially at first. It's scary, starting out charging people for stuff because, now you're on the hook for something. Especially, if you're new to something, chances are the projects that you are working on are people that a lot closer and stuff like that. So there's a lot more pressure with it and whatnot. But I think for me, one of the main reasons why I had started this studio is not only do I enjoy the audio aspect, the producing aspect of it, but I had some, I would say, not so favorable studio sessions myself, and I kind of hit this crossroads of like, as a musician, like, okay, what am I doing? Like, am I trying to make a living touring and going the musician route? Like, what is my goal? I had to kind of sit down and have a pretty hard talk with myself to figure out exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted it to be music, but I was a little apprehensive about making my actual personal music my job. Like, I guess for me that was a little bit unnerving. Like, I didn't want to take something that I love so much and make it my job, because I was worried that like maybe I would, I don't know, sort of squeeze the passion out of it or something like that, for lack of a better term. So I had, like I said, I had a couple of sessions where, like, working with some other people, it wasn't really fun. It was pretty stressful. And I saw these other people doing this, and I was like, this is very feasible. Like, I can totally do this. I can totally do what this guy is doing. Like, I'm totally convinced, like, I can make this happen. So for me, it was coming across that, discovering that, and then figuring out, okay, what am I going to provide to people? What do I want? What am I going to offer that's different? There's a lot of people who record, but what am I offering that is different than the next guy, besides like differences in sound? And to me, I wanted to start a studio, and that's why my studio is called Metasonic Studios. It's sort of this word I made myself. It roughly translates to beyond sound, because for me, it's not just about the music and creating music. Yeah, sure, that's like, the most important thing. But it's like, I wanted to provide an atmosphere for my clients where we could have fun, and it wasn't like this super stressful, like convoluted thing. It's like, we can come in, we can track stuff. It's, it's mellow. Although like you're trying your hardest and you're trying to get the best out of a musician and all these other things, I felt like a lot of my sessions that I had been in personally, like as a musician, they just seemed kind of cold and dry. And I was like, man, there's got to be a way to make this more fun. And growing up, I came from a family of business owners. Like, pretty much all of the males in my family all own businesses. So like, my father, my grandfather, and a couple of my uncles all own their own businesses. So I'd been around just business in general. And to me, one of the most important things in business is customer service. And I feel like in some of these sessions and places that I'd been, like, that was on the back burner. It was just like, let's make this music good, and that's it. And it's like, I think you can do both. So that kind of drove me, and I started to get a plan together about how I was going to do it. So I know that we're going to make a long sweep here, getting back to your original question about like charging and stuff like that. But I think it's kind of important to kind of get the basics out of like how this is all formed. So basically, first getting the studio started and getting to a point where I felt confident. I felt confident with my work against others around me, where I felt like, hey, my work against this person or this other person's work, although like audio engineering and mixes and stuff like that, I feel like it can be totally like subjective. But I feel like from like a fundamental standpoint, everything matched up. So as soon as I gained that confidence, it was just charging people something I felt like they couldn't refuse, like it was a good deal. And at first it's kind of tough because you want to make money, you know what I mean? Like you got bills to pay, you're taking all this time out to do this. I was working a job and then basically sort of trickled down my hours and sort of built up my hours in the audio production stuff. So it was kind of hard, but I didn't make the money my main focus. My main focus was, I want everybody that comes out of my studio to have a good time, and I want them all, when they go and they talk to their buddies and their other bands and all these other things, I want I want my studio to be talked about in a positive manner, because that word of mouth and getting better at my craft, and the word of mouth and making my product, so to speak, as good as I could was my main focus. And the money, I just told myself, like, the money's going to come. Let's not focus on the money. Let's make the price something where, like, people aren't going to turn it down, so I can get the work, and then I can get that kind of rolling. Because the more people I get, in and out of the studio, the more projects I work with, the more people that I network with, that's going to equate to bigger, better projects and more money down the road. Whereas, like, I think if you focus too much in the beginning in any business on, the money aspect of it and not your product, I think in my opinion, I think you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, like, I think that it's so important to understand that what you're offering has to be something that is good and wholesome and makes people feel like they can feel at home in your studio. I think that's so important. I spoke to another producer, and he was saying, like, I make sure the vibe is set up. Like, yeah. I don't want people to be uncomfortable when they come to the studio, because that's going to set them up for not failure, but that's going to set them up for not an ideal situation.
Yeah, and that can be one of the toughest things for me. I don't feel like it is. I feel like, I don't know, I can't really think of any project I've ever had in the studio where it hasn't been fun, in some way, shape, or form. So for me, I guess it hasn't been tough, because that has been my main focus. But that can be tough, and if you don't have that, I feel like, man, you're going to have a hard time, because if you're dealing with, like, a nervous client or somebody who's not comfortable, you're not going to get the best out of them. And if you don't get the best out of them, they're not going to be happy with their performance. And right off the bat, you're already off to a bad start, and you haven't touched an EQ, a compressor, you haven't started mixing anything.
Yeah, absolutely. And so whenever a band comes to you or an artist comes to you, can you walk me through your process from like start to finish, like what you do to create a song?
I'd say from the engineering side of it, or even just producing side of it, most of the time when people come to me, song is already written. Like, okay. I sort of figure out in the beginning how good they are at recording themselves already. Some bands that come to me, they already have, like, little recording setups. They have, they're very well organized. They have, like, all their MIDI together. They have, like, everything set. And some bands that come to me, they're like, they have absolutely no clue. So I try to define that first, because if they have everything together and they know, like, hey, this is the song, this is how long it is, these are all the parts, and they know what it is, well, then all we have to do is record. But if they just have, like, the song idea in their head, to me, I want to just get that into my DAW. I want to get that down and recorded, so that we can kind of listen to it and they can kind of take a different perspective from it. And then we can decide, well, do you guys want me to help you produce this? Do you not want me to? Like, I always leave that sort of open. I try not to butt my way into other people's art. Like, if somebody wants something a certain way or they like something a certain way, if it's really bad, I might try and convince them or try and get them to do something a bit different. But at the end of the day, like, it's their art, and my job is just, it's the most, first and foremost, is to make it sound good. So we sort of define those things and get it out. If it happens to be something where, like, they don't even have, like, a basic interface, they can't record themselves, they don't really have anything down, basically, we'll get that down, we'll go through it, like I said, we'll kind of chop it up, and if they're up for it, we'll throw some ideas in. Like, that's always a fun thing for me, because, like, here I have, like, this song that's kind of has this rough start to it, but there's something already there, right? There's already certain defined notes and chords and things to work around. So it's defined to a point. Well, now we can take it and I can mention ideas about maybe melodies or different instruments we can add, different effects and stuff like that. But to answer your question, yeah, I guess it kind of depends on the band and the project itself, like what they come in with and what their knowledge level is.
Yeah, and like what their overall goal is for that project, that song, or that album, whatever it is they're working on.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I get that totally. So my last question for you is, what is something you know now that you wish you knew when you started?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I think if you asked me this question in 10 years, it'd probably still be the same. I think one of the hardest things to do, especially in a situation where you're going from having a job where, like we had kind of talked about before this, before we had started the podcast, having a job where you have this set income that's coming in. You have sort of this comfort because you can plan things around, because you know every Friday or every other Friday you get this direct deposit. You know how much it is. It's always the same amount. You can rely on it as long as you showed up to work and you did your job, right? Well, one of the scariest things that I've probably done, especially, like I said, having a wife and kids and a mortgage and all this stuff, is going, okay, this very comfortable thing I have, it doesn't suit me as a person, and I want to go into this other realm, this completely different thing. There's no guarantees. I haven't done it for a living, so in that regard, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm just going to hit the ground running. That was probably one of the scariest experiences for me, because I felt like I was just jumping into the fire. I was so afraid of like failing, not because I couldn't necessarily just pick up and get another job, but I felt like this was the one thing in life that I had really decided to do that was maybe even a little bit bigger than myself. And it was like, okay, how am I going to do this? But to go back to your question, I think what I would tell myself is just not to worry so much. I think especially in those first years, man, I probably stressed out a lot more. No, I did stress out a lot more than I should have. And that's an important thing. Like, we need stress. It's a motivator. It keeps us in line. It keeps us focused and all these different things. But I don't know. I think that now, being at the point that I am, I have a totally different perspective. And like I said, in 10 years from now, if you ask me this question, I'd probably say the same thing, because I'm probably stressing about things now that I probably don't need to stress about. And that's the hardest thing, is like gaining that confidence and just being like, okay, I'm going to do this, and not letting it like totally, like, I guess, cripple you in a way.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. If somebody wants to potentially hire you to, produce or mix and master or do anything with you, where can they go to find you and get a hold of you?
I do have a website. It's just www.metasonicstudios.com, and Metasonic is spelled METASONIC. You can reach me through there. There's an email service on there. Or probably the easiest way is if you go on Facebook, Jeremy Davis, if you find me, or even my band Animus Complex, you can find me through that. And I also have a Facebook account for my studio. So any of those routes work for me. I'm not really much of an email guy, so usually the Facebook route is usually the quickest for me.
Perfect. Hey, man, thank you. Thank you for coming on Project Freelance and sharing your stories, your insight, and how you got to where you are today.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It was a good time.
All right, guys, that was my podcast with Jeremy Davis. Jeremy, thank you so much for coming on Project Freelance and sharing your stories and your insight with my audience. I'm sure up-and-coming producers will get a lot out of this episode, and I think it's super cool, one, that you're self-taught, and two, that you started on cassette. Like, that's so fascinating to me. You don't hear that very often these days, so it's cool to hear that you started out that way, like an old-school route. It's very hip-hop of you. So if you guys want to hit him up at Metasonic Studios or Animus Complex on Facebook, I will put all of his links down in the description for you to go browse his pages, and his website as well will be down there in the description if you want to check that out. If you guys enjoyed this episode of Project Freelance, please do me a huge favor and leave a rating and feedback. And if you do those things, take a screenshot of your feedback and send it to me at Project Freelance on Instagram or on Twitter, and I will send you a signed photo print that I have taken, and I'll get that out to you as soon as possible. Thank you guys for listening to another episode of Project Freelance. I will talk to you again next Monday at 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time when these episodes come out. Stay strong, keep enduring, go out, and go create something.